It's DJ, and he's right here. Good morning, DJ. How we doing?
I don't know. You said expert. I thought, oh, crap, I got in the wrong time. I guess I messed up my times this morning.
Again?
Yeah. Can I give you what I'm doing right now, by the way? What this looks like this time of year? Because nobody wants to hear this, and it'll bore everybody, but I have a captive audience, so I'm going to tell you guys. This is what is affectionately known as chasing ghost season for scouts and for what I do. So, like this morning, I am just scouring, like type in like pro day in Twitter, and I just see, okay, this reporter said, oh, this team had this player in for a visit, or this player ran fast as pro day. So then I have the APT sheets, which is a file, which is every pro day, all the results. It's the same thing all the teams get. So I'll cross-check the name. I'll go to that sheet, see if they actually did have a good workout, and then, okay, now he gets added to the Excel sheet. And then you look and see, does he have any numbers or any stats? And then you go through what is an unbelievable gong show speed dating exercise of tape, where it is 15 plays, thumbs up or thumbs down, and we move on to the next one. It is literally chasing ghosts.
And you think that's going on not just in Daniel Jeremiah's office, but around 32 franchises?
I've had multiple times during this time of the year since I've been in this job where I've talked to a GM, two of them off the top of my head who are still on these teams, and I've called and said, hey, this is a little bit of a wild goose chase, but this kid, he ran well at his pro day. He had some sack production. I found out he was hurt, but like just put him on. And so the GM did not know who he was. And then twice off the top of my head, I was on the draft when those teams took those players in the 6th round. So like they have, this is what happens. You get there towards the end of the draft and you're like, well, this guy's like a defensive tackle. He's 6'4", 298, and he ran 4.8 flat. Like, shoot, why not roll the dice on him versus somebody else we know can't play.
You know what that feels like, Brock? You remember the name years and years ago? It was one of John's first years. You remember the name Jamison Konz? Konz.
Yes.
Right? I mean, he was some freak show athlete who could play 9 positions, jumped, I think, over a table. Like, he just had crazy numbers. He turned out he couldn't really play, but they took a flyer on him in the 7th round.
About the play part of it, the athleticism part of it, yes. The play part of it was a little bit of a fringe player, but yes.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, it turns out he couldn't play.
That's what that part of the draft is, though. Like a gamble on greatness, man. You want to get somebody that you know has played a lot, but can't play. Like, I'd rather take a shot on somebody I don't know.
How important is scheme for especially interior offensive linemen?
Well, I think, I think every good team, and you'll hear this every time a coach gets hired nowadays, right? Like, when was the last time that somebody got hired and stood at the podium and said, we're going to have a singular scheme. We don't want to be multiple. We want to be very singular. We're going to be very narrow. We're going to do 2 things, and that's it.
Been a little while.
Yeah. I mean, so I think when you look around the league, I think sometimes we can get fall in the trap of saying this is just purely a zone team, or this is a gap scheme, or this is a mauling team, this is a moving team. I think the best teams, Kyle and Sean McVay are good examples of that. Look at how their run games have kind of changed and morphed over the last several years. So I don't know that it's quite as much as it was back in like the Alex Gibbs Denver Broncos days, where we're like, we know exactly what that offensive line looks like. Okay,
so then as you're thinking about this Seahawks offensive line, I'm not done talking about it, unfortunately. I wish I was. Are you looking for what will make the best guard? A guard or a tackle that doesn't have all of the qualities, especially arm length, to play tackle?
I have not talked to an offensive line coach that would disagree with the fact that they all want 5 tackles starting on the offensive line. 5 guys that have that type of movement, and then hopefully you get the guys that you kick inside can play with a little leverage and can move people, but they want to have that tackle athleticism because you're still going to get isolated in pass protection. We can get carried away with how these guys move people in the run game, but if you can't slide, mirror, and anchor in pass protection, it doesn't matter. So that to me is always kind of what you look for, but I also think that teams have become obsessed, and rightfully so, with the firmness of the pocket on the interior. So to me, it's you start there. If you can't anchor, you can't play on the interior.
Last week I really appreciated you as you started going into the detail of grades. Salk fell asleep. He was not real excited to hear about the minutiae.
Yeah, I heard him snore actually. For a minute there.
Yeah, the difference between the grading scale up to an 8.0 versus the rounds. He's a 115. He's middle of the round. What do you end up doing? If I were to see your sheet there on the NFL Network set 2 weeks from tomorrow, what does Daniel Jeremiah have in front of him?
Yeah, I use the the player and the starter backup role player. I use that. That was what I grew up on.
That's what you grew up on.
That's what I grew up on. So when I talk to guys that that I worked with over the years, Joe Ortiz being one of them, who's the Chargers general manager, Ian Cunningham, who's assistant general manager of the Bears, Andy Weidel, who's assistant GM of the Steelers, Joe Douglas, who just had been with the Jets. All these guys, I could call them, and we've done this, and we've done it for close to 30 years, and be like, hey, what's going on? I just got back from lunch. How was it? That was a 6-7 soup. And it's like, okay, I know exactly what that is. I know exactly what that is. That's just how we communicated. My buddy's single now, and he's dating someone. How is it? She's a 59. Okay, all right. I know exactly what that means.
How different?
You're like the baseball scouts with the 80-20 scale. It's kind of the same thing, right? Everything they do is on the 80-20 scale.
And I talk to those guys all the time. You guys know how much I love baseball, and I talk to guys in that world, and it was funny because all along those lines, I was talking to a baseball GM, and I said, what interesting thing about this quarterback class is it's not the best quarterback group. And I said, the only player that I think has 180 trait is, I would say, Jalen Milroe he's an 80 runner. Like, that would be the one guy who has an 80 trait. Mm-hmm. So I can speak multiple languages here. Sure. I don't have to just be pinned into just the football.
Well, it's nice to know that you're talking to AJ Preller. I don't know what other baseball GMs you'd be out there chatting with.
I've talked to some other guys, but I have not in a while. So that was AJ Preller.
Yeah, I had a little gut feeling it might have been.
Yeah. By the way, I asked you that question because I'm really curious about this class. The difference, because I've heard the difference between draft pick 15 and draft pick 50 and 55 and 60. And I mean, how significant a swing in draft from your grade is your 15th guy to your 50th guy?
Not much. There's very little. It's interesting to me when you look at it. I tweeted this out again, and I'm just going to keep beating this drum. It's just, you've got to just think starters in this draft. Starters. I just want to collect 3 or 4 starters, and that's my goal. And I think that's it's very doable in this draft. There's a lot of those guys, and you kind of have the different definitions of that. Like, okay, this guy's gonna, I'm telling you, this guy is going to eventually start. Versus this guy potentially could start. And then you start getting into the conversation of, okay, is this someone who can just like plug the hole in the boat for a couple years, or is this like we can check this position off and not worry about this for the next 6 or 7 years? We're going to be good. And I think there are guys like that. I think there are guys in this draft. You're going to be winning players, as you can call them, and we can plug them in and not worry about that position for a little while.
So it's interesting. It's a good lead in to this article I sent to Brock, but unfortunately the colors were too similar, and Brock's colorblind, and he couldn't read it.
Don't tell me you're colorblind.
So he struggled to understand.
My dad is. My dad wore some interesting combinations growing up.
Do you know the name Kevin Cole? I guess he used to work at Pro Football Focus, and now he's got something called Unexpected Points. I was unfamiliar with the name. I think we're going to try to get him on next week. I just thought he would, I think, describe himself as one of the nerds looking at the draft from that perspective, not a scouting perspective, but a data analytics perspective. And I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. I set that up to sort of give context. But ultimately, he was looking at what he referred to as surplus positional value, essentially how much more money it would cost to get that same player at the same position in free agency or on a second contract.
Yeah.
And it's something that we've talked about, I think, like even last week. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'll text it to you. It was a really good article. It's dense, I'm not going to lie, but it was good. And he ultimately ended up putting quarterbacks in their own scenario, taking them out of it. He divided all the other positions into essentially 3 tiers. Tier 1 was tackles, D linemen, and edge rushers. Tier 2 was wide receivers and corners. And then everyone else is in Tier 3. Interior linemen, linebackers, tight ends, running backs, safeties, all fell into Tier 3. And when you look at the chart, you see really massive differences in really almost until pick 64 is where everything starts to come back together, where Tier 1 has significantly more value over where they're going to get paid later. Tier 2, significantly more than tier 3, but like it's right in the middle of the two. And then there's another huge drop down to tier 3. So you see that, and it really makes you wonder, like, tackles, D lineman, and edge rusher, like it feels like that's almost a given that in the first or maybe even second round, that's what you should be doing because of how much they cost elsewhere.
Yeah, no, it's a absolutely valid point. The one thing I can tell you though is that you just have to be a little bit careful that you don't pass on greatness at one of these other positions. Like that's my only caveat there, because I remember having a conversation with a team, stacking a tight end who ended up being an elite tight end versus some receivers. And he said, well, we have a higher grade on the tight end, but the receivers, in terms of what we'd have to pay in the open market and the value of the position and the savings that we're going to have by this selection, we ended up putting the receivers over him. And then in hindsight, looking back on that draft, you had receivers in the next 2 rounds who were very close to the guy that they ended up ranking up there with that tight end. Meanwhile, the gap between that tight end and what he became versus everyone else was pretty drastic.
Yeah.
And he's a great player. So that's the tightrope that you have to walk. By the way, I was looking at this morning. How many receivers in the first 3 rounds on average over the last 5 NFL drafts? How many receivers do you think go in the first 3 rounds?
In the first 3?
First 3 rounds.
Jeez.
12 and a half.
That sounds about right.
16. We've been averaging 5.6 receivers in the first round. Now, we're not going to get that this year. We don't have those guys this year. But it does, looking at this, I'm convinced second round, we're going to see a run on these wideouts. We're going to see a bunch of them.
So it's interesting. According to this, that would be the 6th most valuable position, according to the surplus value. He went quarterbacks, then, as I said, tackles, D-line, edge, and he said corner was actually significantly more valuable than wide receiver. So that's teams spending a lot of capital for a position that, is valuable, certainly more so than some of the others, but is really more middle of the pack. And I guess this is why I keep coming back to the Seahawks, and I keep beating this drum about linemen or D linemen even versus wide receivers. Like, if you say that you want to be a team that runs the ball and plays physically and all that, and that those positions tend to be overdrafted, it feels like there's no way you could justify drafting a wide receiver somewhere early in this draft.
Yeah, and I don't think that you need to in this draft, and I don't think that there's those guys, like for me, we talked about grading scale, like those 6-7 level receivers for me, which we had a bunch of in last year's draft. I mean, Travis Hunter's in his own category, but outside of that, like I have a bunch of 6'3", 6'2", 6'1s, which are in that lower tier, which to me, again, that's why I think if you want a wide receiver, I think day 2 is a sweet spot for you. Even just wait into the 3rd round. I think you get a good player that can help you in the 3rd round and go bigs. You can go bigs early and not only get impact, but you get value.
Since I didn't ask you a question there, I just made a statement.
You know what? I'm going to go get a cup of coffee.
Well, I feel bad. I didn't ask a question. I'm just making statements.
No, it's great.
I'm sorry. Oh, jeez.
No,
I'm
it's
sorry.
great. No, go ahead.
But I wanted names, Brock. I want names. I need names, okay? Since D linemen and edge rushers are always in style, no matter what, give me a list of guys that could be available at 18 or in the 50s where the Seahawks are that would be good picks for the Seahawks this year at those 2 positions, which aren't really of need.
Which ones?
Yeah.
D lineman, interior D lineman and edge rusher.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interior D lineman. You're looking at the combination of 3 guys from the interior D line. You're looking at Derek Harmon from Oregon, Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, and then going big with Kenneth Grant, who obviously they'll have familiarity with coming out of Michigan. So those would be the 3 names that I think are in that mix in the first round. If you want to go into the next round, you go into the second round. You start looking at guys like Darius Alexander from Toledo, who's a little bit of a late bloomer, but is big and long and really an explosive guy. He gets into that mix. TJ Sanders from South Carolina. You get Tyleik Williams from Ohio State. Alfred Collins. Like, there's a pretty good group. I mean, it's a deep group of defensive tackles. So that's going to drift even into the 3rd round. There's good players to be found there at the defensive tackle spot. We go to the edge guys at 18. Sitting there, now you're looking at a whole swath of guys, right? You're looking at the Mike Green, Michael Williams, Izaraku from Boston College, maybe a little early for him. but he's in that mix for me. Plus, Shamar Stewart, James Pierce, like there's a lot of guys. The second round player that I love, and I finally found somebody. I talked to a defensive coordinator a couple days ago. Was the first guy that I talked to that shared my love for Landon Jackson from Arkansas. I think is going to be a really, really good player in the second round. He's an LSU transfer. He's big. He's long. Had a dominant Senior Bowl. Plays really, really hard, and by all accounts, is a great kid. So it's weird during this time of year. There's always some guys when you're getting feedback and like there's a lot of love for a player that you're like, I'm not quite as high on him. And then maybe you have one or two guys that you really like and you can't find sponsors around the league. So when you connect with a coach or a GM who shares an opinion, it was like at least I'm not taking crazy pills. Somebody else is seeing this.
Don't pass on greatness. That's what I wrote down on my little sheet right here. I think two of the harder guys. So DJ, every day leading up to the draft in this month of April, I do a prospect. And many of mine are guys that I've seen on the road just personally myself. Just an affinity for them as a human, affinity for them as a fit. Maybe they're a late rounder like Jay Higgins, the linebacker from Iowa that I just loved, or just some of the different guys. I'm getting now to the point where I know my top five, and almost all of them are offensive linemen. But today was a tough one for me because I'm trying to pick between Mykel Williams and Jihad Campbell. Two guys that were 5-star freak shows out of high school. Yeah. Two guys whose bodies you would build with clay and be like, yep, this is exactly the way you build them. But in Campbell, just kind of a 1 year of huge production, and Williams, kind of up and down production and injury at Georgia. Between those two, if either are sitting there at 18, would they fit in that quote-unquote don't pass on greatness?
It's a great question. To me, Campbell would be in that. I would say that. The interesting thing is they're connected a couple different ways because you're buying what they're going to become more than what they are. Correct. And both of them have injuries because Campbell he just had surgery, so he's not going to be able to get through any of the offseason stuff either. So you're there is a little bit of hope and wish there. I've seen Campbell make more plays and do more things on the field than I have with Mykel Williams. So I would tend to lean in that direction. And sometimes when you see guys with a similar profile that have had immediate success, Edgerrin Cooper coming out of Texas A&M reminded me a lot of Campbell. He played hell on wheels last year for the Green Bay Packers. So yep. I would lean towards him, especially in if you're gonna try and build your team ultimately to win a Super Bowl and get out of the NFC, whereas in the AFC you're thinking about talking to all those quarterbacks you got to game plan against. Right now I'm thinking about the Philadelphia Eagles and Saquon Barkley and what they want to do, and I've got a guy in Campbell who can match you up there.
Salk learned today, and I love this about this time of year too, because he'll get in that Google machine and he'll see a name or something. I had mentioned that you and I were tweeting about Jamari Caldwell as maybe a mid-round kind of nose tackle, and told you the story about DoorDash and all that fun stuff. And big dancing bears are always fun. And somebody texted in a name to Salk, and then Salk gets on the Google machine, and he's like, who is this 6'6", 465-pound D tackle from Florida?
Number 18? Where do you take that guy?
Can he play?
Can you do me one? Just promise me you'll do this one thing.
Yes.
And you can film it if you want to. Don't film it. It's fine. I just need a number. But if I text you guys the 3-cone number, can we have Salk do the 3-cone?
I've done a 3-cone.
Oh, he did it in 2017.
I've done a 3-cone. You want my 3-cone number? I'll go back and find it while we're talking.
I think you can get him.
I will find it while we're talking. It was my worst of any of the combine numbers. I was really not great at the 3-cone.
The Seahawks did a combine in 2017 for all media members.
Yep.
Salk surprisingly athletic with his vert and a couple things.
Really?
The shuttle, the
over
cones.
25 on the vert.
All right, so I actually close. Hold on, that's not it. I'm looking. Give me just a moment. I'll pull them up.
Yeah, and tell me about this D tackle. Is he going to get drafted from Florida?
I don't think so. I mean, he is massive, obviously, but he can't really move.
He can't move.
So,
no. All right.
What about the tush push?
All right. So was he? I'll give you my numbers. You can tell me if you think he was over under. In the 40, was he over under 5.403?
Oh, way over.
I'm gonna say he's over.
Okay, so I'm faster than the 460.
He was 5.9,
or at least I was.
So I got the numbers right here. Yeah. So he ran a 5.95.
Yeah. All right. So that's good. So it was a little faster. It's nice to know. 3-cone drill.
He was 6'6", 450 at the pro day.
What did he do in the 3-cone?
The 3-cone was a 9.
Okay, I did it in 8.25.
Nice, that boy. Good job. What was your vert? What'd you get on the vert?
The vert. All right, let's get to my vertical. I got broad first. You have broad jump there?
Oh yeah.
My broad jump was 7 foot 10 inches.
Dude, you got him by a foot. He was 6'10".
Go, you're killing him, Saul.
Killing this guy.
I think he got you in the vert.
He's going to have you in the bench when we get
I would
there. but go
imagine.
ahead.
Well, we did the bench differently. My vert, what was his vert?
His vert was 25.
He jumped higher than I did.
Oh, my gosh. Come on.
He jumped higher than everybody other than one person. Only John Boyle in the whole media combine did better at 26. I did 22 and a half.
That's tough. Okay, how about your short shuttle? Did we do a short shuttle?
We didn't do that.
No.
And the bench press, we were just, I think it was just 65
185.
pounds. No, it was just
He
65
did
pounds.
36 reps at 220.
That's a lot.
Wow.
I mean, I would hope so. So can you draft him or not?
Never mind. The weight was 464.
Yeah, he's 464. 6'6", 464. Hey,
The APP
DJ.
system
But DJ, could
only
you get
goes
that
up to
guy down?
450.
Jokes
They
aside,
had
could you
they
get that
wrote a
guy
note-
down to
they wrote a note in
400?
there. Yeah, absolutely.
Like, what would he
Absolutely.
be like at 380, 400?
Yeah, I mean that's the.
Could he be
that's
Ted
what
Washington?
whoever's- That's what he's got to sell, and that's what teams are going to try and buy there. But yeah, I don't think you can play it at that size. So you got to lose 70, 80 pounds, and I don't know. Ted Washington was an unbelievable athlete as well as just a massive human being. That was like you go to the games and get the little ice cream and the baseball helmet. Like that's what his football helmet looked like on his head.
Oh, yes. Space Eater. Hey, last minute here. We're sitting at 18 on draft day. Is Cam Ward the only QB taken by the time we get to 18?
I think there's a possibility that's correct.
Okay, so at 18 then is Jackson Dart, is Shedeur Sanders. People are going to be mumbling and bumbling around me at the Seahawks facility, and the media members and fans, I'm sure, are going to be like, is this the year to take a quarterback? If Shedeur Sanders is sitting there at 18, would he be a fit in this kind of system and that kind of value that a QB could add?
I think you could say he could be a fit, yeah. But I think, in my opinion, I think Sam Darnold's more talented, and you've already brought him in the building. So I'm going to try and do something to help Sam. And Sam's he's not old, so you've still got runway in front of him. So yes and no. Yes, it's a fit. I don't know that I would do that there.
What a day. What a day. Is those legitimate question? You're going to sound like I'm making a joke, but this is actually a real question. Is Ozempic legal in the NFL?
I don't see why it wouldn't be.
Daniel, you're DJ. You know what you're getting a
How did
taste
we
of
get
right
here?
now?
Well, you're talking about this 460-pound
How did we
dude.
get
If he's
here?
got to get down to like
DJ, how did we get
380.
here? That's how I've got here for 16 years. You plant a little seed in Salk, and all of a sudden it starts to germinate, and you water it just a
I
little
wasn't
bit.
sure if it was considered a performance-enhancing drug for a guy who's 460 pounds to keep him under $4.
I think that's got to be legal. It's a health thing,
Right.
Right.
Sure.
You'd be prescribed it by a
I'm going to
doctor.
dig into
for
that,
sure.
and next Wednesday have an answer for that exclusively, okay?
Please, the next
Yeah.
time you're talking to GMs, if you wouldn't mind asking them whether or not it's legal for these guys. All right. Thank you, DJ, as
Hey,
always.
Today, value, scheme fit, Ozempic. I feel like we touched all the bases.
All right. There we sure did. There's
Chasing
Daniel
ghosts.
Jeremiah.